Hello, my name is Ryan Hammill. I'm the executive director of the Ancient Language Institute, one of its co-founders. I'm very excited today to be speaking with our two Biblical Hebrew fellows here at the Ancient Language Institute. ALI, if you're not familiar, we're an online language school. We're focused, as you might guess by the name, on ancient languages, although we are willing to push the envelope a little bit and call Old English ancient, even though it's more medieval. But we run online classes in Latin, ancient Greek, Biblical Hebrew, and Old English, along with doing a lot of work on building curriculum, which is something we're going to be talking about today, and also doing in-person events, so ancient Greek immersion camps. More to come, hopefully. Anyhow, today, here talking with Tyler Foster and Gustavo Emos about Biblical Hebrew to give interested students a window into what our Biblical Hebrew program looks like. Tyler and Gustavo have been very busy on building Biblical Hebrew curriculum. Gustavo is very new to the team. Tyler is the founder of our Biblical Hebrew program, but they've been working together to build some exciting stuff, overhauling a bunch of all of our curriculum. So we want to take some time today to introduce these two gentlemen and let them introduce the program, the curriculum, their hopes and dreams for our Biblical Hebrew program, et cetera, et cetera. So, Tyler, since you have tenure here at ALI, why don't you go first? Go ahead and introduce yourself. We met you when you were still in Jerusalem at the Polis Institute. Great institution for people interested in ancient languages. And you were looking for a job in Idaho to go teach Hebrew, but they didn't have an opening. So we got introduced to you. You came, started our Biblical Hebrew program, and now you have that job in Idaho. But we're very grateful to you that you've continued to run our program here. Tyler's the lecturer in biblical languages at New St. Andrews College, in addition to being a Greek and Biblical Hebrew fellow here at ALI. So Tyler, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got interested in the languages, etc.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. So Tyler Foster. My language journey really didn't begin until college. I was interested in languages before, but I only knew a couple, like English, maybe a little Pig Latin and whatnot. But I was always
Pretty ancient.
interested. It's pretty ancient, hand signs, whatnot. But it wasn't until college, undergrad, that I started Greek first. Was in my sophomore year, and it was when I was going to go into a language program, I was so excited because I was thinking, let's speak in Greek, let's enjoy the language as a language. And I got into the class, and unfortunately, that's not how it was taught. As in so many places in the States, it was more of a grammar translation methodology. And so, needless to say, and not necessarily the fault of my professors, but I didn't learn much Greek over those semesters. But fast forward a year after I'd done a year of Greek, my Hebrew program was amazing. Throughout my introduction, I'll probably drop a few names in case you're interested in looking some of these people up. But my first Hebrew professor was Jesse Schumann. He taught 1 year at Bethlehem College and Seminary in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And he taught a semi-immersion method Hebrew instruction. So we were in English part of the time, in Hebrew part of the time, and he really got us into telling stories in Hebrew. So he would write up these stories. They were graded stories, so they got more difficult as they went on. And part of our job in the classroom was to, first of all, having read the stories, we were supposed to tell them to one another in a certain amount of time. So we had 4 minutes, and then 3 minutes, and then 2 minutes, and we'd tell the stories until we could get them going really quickly. And it was just an enjoyable experience. And I would say that that's where my Hebrew love was sparked, was in his love for the language and his love for using the language as a language. You could tell that it meant something to him. So then went into a second year, which was a different teacher, John Beckman. I believe he's still at Bethlehem, and also a great teacher, probably the most humble teacher I've ever had. And we studied I think it was Deuteronomy. Great experience, but no immersion in that class. So as I was finishing out my undergrad there, I was looking at the state of my Hebrew and the state of my Greek, and quite disappointed in the level of my Greek. And so I heard randomly about a school in Israel, of all places, that taught both Greek and Hebrew, as well as other languages, in a complete immersive experience. So Polis Institute, the Jerusalem Institute of Languages and Humanities. And so as soon as we finished up college, my wife and I moved out of the country for 2 years. And right during COVID, well, right before COVID happened. So it was a fun experience.
Oh
But
boy.
yeah, it was great. It was fun. And so we studied there. I studied there for 2 years, both Greek and Hebrew. And so studied under Eyal Neum, great teacher, obviously a fluent native speaker, as well as into the biblical language as well. So a number of these people had their own curriculum. So Jesse had something called Picture Hebrew, and he's been developing it and is probably coming out with it fairly soon. And then Eyal had from Polis has his, which is in the beginning. It's not published, so you'll have to go study with him if you want to see his curriculum. It's really good. But that was sort of my educational part of the language. So when I was finishing up there in Israel, Ryan already mentioned, I was in contact with a school here, New St. Andrews, located in Moscow, Idaho. And one thing led to another, and Jonathan and Ryan from ALI contacted me. I started working with them. And then I started working with New St. Andrews, I think the following year. And this is going to my 3rd year here. So I think that's probably enough about me for now.
Thanks. Sure. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more in a sec about kind of the way you've seen students come in and develop in their Hebrew skills over the time that you've been teaching them. And you've had a few kind of assistant teachers along the way, but all pretty short term. And you've been the anchor throughout that whole time. But before we do that, Gustavo, I met you, Gustavo, through Colin Gorey, the founder of our old English program, who, by my understanding, I'm not sure how exactly he met you, but studied Yiddish with you with a friend of his, kind of on a dare, because she
Yes.
didn't believe that all of this spoken second language acquisition, comprehensible input, this style of language learning even worked. And Colin
Yeah.
said, well, let's try it. And she said, well, I've always wanted to learn Yiddish. And so they're like, well, let's just speak in Yiddish with somebody who knows Yiddish. We'll see if we learn Yiddish. Do I have the story right, Gustavo?
Yes, exactly. So hello, everyone. I'm Gustavo Emos, and I'm very happy to be here. Very happy to be part of the team. And you just mentioned Colin. How did I meet him? He has this friend that really wanted to learn Yiddish to get closer to her family roots and revive Yiddish in her family, at least, which people used to speak but don't speak anymore. And she thought it would be actually impossible to learn Yiddish. And they found me through YouTube, because I used to do a lot of YouTube videos in Yiddish for Yiddish students on YouTube with a
Okay.
former colleague of mine. And this friend of Colin thought that she wouldn't be able to study Yiddish alone. And so she schlepped her husband and Colin to the class with her. And it started as a group. We did a lot of work together. We made a lot of progress, but life gets busy.
Sure.
His friend and her husband were not able to continue, but Colin continued. So we were having private Yiddish classes. And at some point, Colin, not just Colin, but other students of mine as well, at the same time, Yiddish students, told me, Gustavo, why don't you teach me Hebrew, ancient Hebrew? Some of them asked for modern Hebrew in Yiddish. So I started teaching Colin
Nice.
ancient Hebrew in Yiddish. And
Nice.
we've been studying together ever since. And he told me about ALI. He told me about your whole philosophy on language learning and how to really teach ancient languages. And I got really excited. And after he insisted a little bit, because I thought, well, I'm mostly a Yiddish teacher. I don't know if I can if I can really help you in any way. But then he told me, no, you're gonna learn a lot. You're gonna have a lot of fun. You'll be able to do amazing work. And I'm glad I joined, because I am indeed learning a lot. And I think yes, we've been able to create. We'll talk more about the curricular work we've been doing, but I think we've been able to really choose interesting vocab and to introduce this vocab and grammar through stories, and really create something that I think might make even the most skeptical students with regards to language acquisition to learn ancient Hebrew. That's really something that I think is important, is worthwhile. I think people should learn languages at all, and even ancient languages. A lot of people think that it's why should one do that? But first of all, it's a lot of fun, and second, it's useful for many different purposes. You learn a lot of interesting stuff, and I'm glad to be able to be part of it, and to work with you guys.
Thanks. Thanks. No, that's great. And the idea of learning one language through the medium of another language, which also is not your native tongue, is really, it's just a really fun, interesting idea.
It is.
I know Luke Ranieri has done a bit of that, both on YouTube, and he's actually, I think he's taught at least one class here teaching Greek through Latin. So similar kind of thing, Hebrew through Yiddish. And and in both cases, these are languages that are like kind of related to varying degrees, and definitely more so than English is to either. So it's really fun. Gustavo, before we dive into class and curriculum and all that stuff, you just graduated with a degree in German literature from the University of Sao Paulo. Gustavo was giving me Portuguese pronunciation lesson before we started this video.
You did great. Sao Paulo,
good.
perfect.
If it was bad, don't blame him. It's my fault. Yeah, tell us a little bit, kind of where are you in the world? How'd you get interested in Yiddish, Biblical Hebrew, German? I mean, you don't have to tell us all the languages you know. You can if you want.
All right. So tell it a little bit about myself. So,
Sure.
I just graduated. I studied German literature here in São Paulo, but I don't come from São Paulo. I come from a city and a state that make up a great icebreaker when speaking Yiddish and Hebrew, because the city is Goiânia, which is the capital of Goiás. And I used to tell everyone that I'm a Goy from Goiânia, Goiás. That is a non-Jewish person from Goiânia, Goiás, and a Yiddish teacher. So how did I get to that? Because I ended up converting to Judaism. Now I have to say I'm a former Goy from Goiânia, Goiás, a Yiddish and a Hebrew teacher. That also works as an icebreaker. It's not as good as it used to be, but it still works.
Formerly a Goy, formerly in Goya.
Exactly.
That's beautiful.
And then people immediately ask me, why does Goiânia have such a name? Are there only Goyim there? It's always fun. It works. as an icebreaker. So, where I come from, there's no Jewish community. I didn't know anything about Hebrew then, about Yiddish. I studied English. I've been studying English ever since I was a kid. My parents thought it would be a good idea to put me in an American school, and that's why I speak English as well. And I decided to study chemistry in the state of São Paulo, in a city that's called Campinas, not far from São Paulo. Back then, I was very into chemistry, into maths, and I really wanted to study chemistry here in São Paulo. When I got here, I met many Jews, many Israelis, exchange students at my university, and I heard people speak in this language that I could not understand, that seemed very different to me, and I thought, it sounds cool, I have to learn it. And I started learning it, and I've made many friends that were really serious about learning Portuguese, and I taught them Portuguese. They taught me Hebrew. So I began with modern Hebrew, and since I wanted to study abroad, and Germany had many opportunities for Brazilian students, I started to learn German. Back then, I didn't know that if you know German and Hebrew, that's the perfect combination to study Yiddish. I didn't even know then that Yiddish existed. And I started learning all these languages, and I got hooked. I only studied languages all day, and eventually I was doing very bad at chemistry. Chemistry, it's hard. You have to study a lot, and I wasn't doing that. I was studying the smallest details of German grammar when I was supposed to be studying calculus. So I got into trouble. Eventually, I tried to flee to any other program because I was doing really bad at chemistry. So I ended up in computational mathematics, but it also didn't work because I was still studying German and Hebrew all day. So I thought to myself, I have to leave. I have to go do something related to languages. And I heard about this German literature program here at São Paulo, at the University of São Paulo. And I decided to do this and to study it. But since I waited too long and I was not able to register for the next academic year, I would have to wait a whole year. And that was great because my friends in Israel told me, come to Israel, come here, live here for some months, visit us. And I went there, and I traveled alone and met these friends, but I traveled a lot in the country. And that was really good for me to get immersed into the language, because I have here in São Paulo many Jewish friends that participated in different programs in Israel, and they come back from Israel speaking fluent Spanish because they go there with Argentinian Jews and they speak only Spanish all day. But since I was on my own, I had to speak Hebrew. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to, I don't know, get food or whatnot. I think that maybe Tyler also probably has stories to tell about this, because it's really, I don't know, when you're in a country with, I don't know, a different alphabet and all of that, you really have to speak. Otherwise, you're really in trouble. You have to do something. And it was really helpful. And then when I came back, I started learning German, and a professor of Hebrew literature here in São Paulo, a friend of mine, told me that I should also study Yiddish. And I started going to different reading circles here in São Paulo. I got very well. I got welcomed very well. I thought that it would be nice to study Yiddish. And then I found out about Yiddish literature, and I got very much interested in Judaism. And then I decided to convert. But in order to convert, it's a fairly long process. One has to study a lot. And I had the privilege of having private classes with my rabbi, and we would sit and study a lot of Hebrew, a lot of Aramaic, a lot of Jewish law, and ever since I've converted, I read regularly at synagogues. I study the Torah portions of the week, and I think really that if one wants to truly understand the Bible, and I don't mean to say that I truly understand the Bible, but that I want to do so, I very much want to do so. I think that if one wants to do so, one has to study the languages of the Bible. And because translations are great, but if you compare these translations with the original text and you dive into the original text, it's you learn a lot more. And I really I really love to study biblical Hebrew, and I've been studying on my own. I also took different courses. I took courses on at my university, but I would say that they didn't help much because they were mostly based on the grammar translation method, on a way that, I don't know, I think some students did adapt and were able to make great progress. But for most people, I don't know, it's too much grammar. You don't see the language as something that you can really uh, learn as fast as one wishes. One pictures the road of learning ancient Hebrew as something that will take a whole life for you to get to some basic comprehension levels. And it doesn't have to be that way. If you try to, even if it's an ancient language, if you try speaking it, it makes much more sense. And the courses that I took at university maybe helped me to learn more what not to do, I would say, when teaching. At least that was my experience here. The courses were great in introducing grammar and discussing grammar in depth. But I would say from the perspective of a person that simply wants to read the Bible and understand it and not really learn all the details of the grammar, I think they could be much better. And I also had the opportunity of studying Hebrew, Ashkenazi Hebrew specifically, with Professor David Katz at the Worker Circle, which is one of the institutions where I work as a Yiddish teacher. And that course was really great because we were really studying biblical Hebrew, speaking in Ashkenazi Hebrew as a living language. And then I really saw that it was possible to speak in Hebrew, not as in Israel. I saw it was possible to speak in Hebrew that is not modern Hebrew. It was really possible to use all of those possibilities that ancient Hebrew grammar offers to express oneself. It's possible to do so, and I've been trying to do so ever since with my students privately, and I'm very glad now that I'll be able to do that also with students at ALI. So I think that's about it. Maybe I even lost the thread of my thoughts, but that's what I.
No, it's great. That's great. Thank you. And there are two things in particular you said that were mirrored in some things Tyler said that I think are really important for people to hear, especially if they find themselves in the position of wondering, should I start learning biblical Hebrew or ancient Greek or any other modern language, but especially the biblical languages, which is both you, Gustavo, and you, Tyler, had experiences in the classroom, in the language classroom, where you feel like you didn't progress very much and didn't learn a lot. Because I think for a lot of beginners who don't have experience with this, they're like, oh, okay, well, that's, you've studied Yiddish and Hebrew and German, and Tyler, you studied Greek and Hebrew, and now just throwing Latin on top. And, oh, well, it's easy for you. You're language people. And for people to know that, no, people like you can sit in the same kind of classrooms that lots of other people have sat in and not make a lot of progress either. This is maybe not universal, but almost universal experience, even for language people. That's really important for people to know, that your mileage really does vary based on the class and the curriculum and the approach and all that stuff. And secondly, that while on the one hand, learning these languages, mastering them, really acquiring them in a deep way should be a lifelong journey, because you're getting better and better and better. You're getting more and more acquainted with the language and literature. At the same time, it doesn't take a lifetime to learn how to read the Bible in the original in a way where you can understand what's going on. It doesn't even take the 7 years of a PhD. It can go way faster than that now. if you're exclusively having the kinds of classroom experiences that you guys alluded to, where it's like, I'm not making much progress. Well, yeah, maybe take 7 years, might take 7 times 7 years. But if you find an approach that really works for you, it can be a lot shorter than that for you to go from not knowing any Hebrew to reading the Hebrew Bible and enjoying it.
Yeah.
That's possible. So, and that's really the mindset we have at ALI is we're here to open that experience up for people and for normal people who might not consider themselves language people. So in 2021 is when we started Biblical Hebrew here. Tyler, you've seen a few cohorts of students come in and kind of march through the language and, go from trying to sound out Hebrew letters, like learning the alphabet, to doing in-depth word studies in the Bible. What can you give a summary kind of what you've seen of
Yeah.
students, how they come in, some of the tools you've enjoyed working with in the past?
Yeah, I'll do that in a second, but I just wanted to revisit a point you were making, and that's the fact that there's this idea that you have to be a language person versus a normal human being, and I think that that's a dichotomy that's a false dichotomy. If you go to Europe or anywhere outside the United States, let's say that, everyone seems to be a language person. Everyone has, a lot of people have to know multiple languages to get around. Even in Israel, most people know at least 2, if not 3 languages. And so I don't know how old Gustavo was. It sounds like he was probably already in his late teens or early 20s, but I was 21 when I went to Bethlehem College. And so I was 22 when I started Greek, and I was 23 when I started Hebrew, which means I've been in Hebrew around, let's say, 7 years now. And able to read a lot, able to read quite a bit. But it's not that I started as a 5-year-old with my parents speaking to me every day. Like, that's the only reason I can be a Hebrew teacher. No, in fact, one of my professors at Polis pulled me aside one time when I was new in the program, and I was dealing with other people there that knew multiple languages. And I was young, and I wanted to learn a lot. I wanted to take 3 languages at the same time. I wanted to do Greek, Hebrew, and Arabic. And so anyway, he pulled me aside, and it was probably a good idea just to stick with 2. But he was saying, as an encouragement, it's not the students that are the best at retaining language. There are people who are really good at retaining vocabulary really quickly, and they can speak a lot quicker, and they seem like they're enjoying it more. But that's not necessarily the person that's going to go off and do something with the language. It really comes down to your commitment as an individual. You know your own strengths and weaknesses, but if you put in the work, you have the incentive, the desire, the drive, those are usually the people that are actually going to do something with their language. And so I feel like that's my story, is I'm not an exceptional language student. I have to take time to learn new vocabulary, and it doesn't come naturally in some ways. But for those who stick with it and really want to get something out of it, they really want to read the text, or they want to use the language in a communicative way with other people. Like those are the people that we really want, and that we want to invest our time in too as well. So anyway, that's an aside before getting into the history at ALI now. So at the very start, we just began with Aleph with Beth. So Aleph with Beth, there's a great resource YouTube channel, and it's total immersion. So there's no English at all. And I would have my students watch these videos before coming to class, and then just in a notebook, I would come up with a lesson plan for that week. Let's say there's five videos with 35 vocab words. and 2 topics or 3 topics that they're introducing, and that set up my my exercise. I would then build exercises to go with that, PowerPoint or whatnot, as well as building out simplified biblical stories. I would probably look back in shame at some of them, but I was really trying to get some sort of content out for my students to read, and also feel like they're reading the Bible. They're simplified, but they're actually reading the creation narrative, and maybe Abraham and Isaac, and these characters that are in the Old Testament. So that was early on in the curriculum. Pretty quickly, though, I realized we needed a little bit more. Olive with Beth is great, but there's a few things that I differ with her on her progression or how she goes about certain things. So we introduced the Biblical Language Center, sort of their 10-week introductory course, which is a bunch of videos, pictures, trying to get students up to a little bit of reading fluency. So I paired that with Olive with Beth. We did these 2 simultaneously, but even with the 2 of those, it felt like the progression, it never, there was no end to the progression. So especially with Olive with Beth, she's building it so slowly, and it has to be if it's a total immersive program, but there's kind of no end in sight. It'll just keep going and keep going, and so you never know, when am I going to finish out let's say a 1-year grammar course that I can then feel qualified to go either take a 2nd-year course, read certain texts, etc. And so that's when we brought in, I think this last year was Picture Hebrew, again back to Jesse Schumann. I'd been using his curriculum in my brick and mortar school here and New St. Andrews, and I'd gone through a year with that. And so I thought, well, let's just stick with the same program, do it both here at NSA and at ALI, and we'll see if we can put it onto the online format. And so we tried that this last year. It had some good things and some not so good things. It was a little bit harder on the online. It's different. It's really created to be an in-person class with a teacher and students face to face. And so where we're at now is building out. We're beginning the process, probably a several year process of a Hebrew curriculum that takes the important parts of a lot of language learning elements and putting them into a package that we can then use either here or we'll talk about this later probably, but we'd like to see this in a lot of places in the future. So as far as the students now, and we've talked about the curricular progression, but the students themselves, I've had great students, and I assume that some of them will be watching this. So if they are, just want you guys all to know that I love you. You guys are great. You make my job worthwhile. And really, it's students that help to make a curriculum as much as a teacher. If the students are engaged and learning and enjoying it, etc. So I've had I have a few students that have been with me for, I don't know, probably 2 years now. And so my oldest cohort, and we've gone through obviously all the beginning materials, and then got through the book of Jonah. We read the book of Ruth, and then I don't know, this last spring we spent basically an entire semester on a single word in Hebrew. We went through a word that I'd wondered about in the past. For those of you who maybe know Hebrew, the word nicham. Nicham, it means a lot of different things depending on what translation you read, and it's used in a place in Jonah specifically. Is kind of where it starts. Is that God nichamed of the evil that he was about to do over the city. So a lot of
relented,
etc. But this word also shows up in other contexts of mourning, when death has happened. And so basically we took this and decided to work through every single passage in the Old Testament where this word shows up. It was, and then categorized it in a nice spreadsheet. And I'm supposed to write a paper on it.
Oh,
Haven't
good.
done that yet, so sorry, class. Anyway, so these are some of the things we've been able to do with, especially as the groups get higher and higher in the program. And yeah, so I think that's maybe all that needs to be said there. So
Great. Great. Well, yeah, let's talk a little bit about what you guys are building. So we want to have a program that works in our kind of online program, but that can also be used in-person settings, because it's really fun to learn and study languages in person. That's why we've started doing in-person camps and events. And so, give us a sense of the different moving pieces. I don't know, Gustavo, you've just kind of jumped in. Maybe you can kind of, from your perspective, talk about what you've been building and what you guys are hoping to see come out the other side, with the understanding that, you're actively working on this. It's a huge project, years down the line, but it's going to be, the beginner stuff is going to be implemented in about 4 weeks, come September,
Yeah.
for fall 2024 Hebrew 101. So yeah, take it away.
Yeah, so really in 4 weeks we're going to be starting. What we've been doing is we discussed all the grammar that we thought was essential to be in an introductory course. And I've had really a lot of luck to be working with somebody like Tyler, because when we started, he already had all of these ideas, and he really thought about all the other curricula, all the other textbooks, the order that concepts are presented, and we discussed what order we thought would be the optimal order to start, in order to enable us to tell stories, engaging stories that will really make learning fun. It has to be fun, but also that will enable our students to be able to approach the biblical text in a reasonable amount of time, and to make sense out of it and be able to understand it. So we began thinking about the grammar, and then we did pretty much the same thing. We discussed the vocab that we thought was really essential for the start. And again, Tyler did amazing work before we even started discussing this, because he made all of these lists with regards to vocabulary, about which words fit into each which categories, about places, names of animals, plants, essential verbs that one has to know. We discussed a lot regular and irregular verbs, in a way as to really be able to introduce verbs and grammar that will enable our students to see the regularities and the patterns in verb conjugation, for example, before they get to see the exceptions. Maybe this is something really important, because sometimes you open up a Hebrew textbook, and Hebrew does have a lot of exceptions. All languages do, but ancient Hebrew has, strong verbs, weak verbs, a lot of detail, a lot of interesting things. But if from day one you get all of this information and you see how complicated these things can be, it might frighten you. So we thought about really introducing these patterns in a way that our students will get to know these patterns, and then we'll tell them, actually, there's a little bit more than that, and we have exceptions
Oh,
to
wait,
these
there's
rules.
more.
Yeah, don't worry. Yeah, it will be a lot of fun, this course. Don't worry. There will be
It's okay
irregularities. There will be.
Students at the very beginning. They'll handle it.
They'll handle. But yeah, we thought about this and grammar, vocab, and we also started writing stories. And it's quite challenging to write stories that make sense with the minimum amount of vocab for each week and grammar, and try and respect the pace of our students, that a pace that we're trying to set to determine with these stories. And it's a process of try and error. You write something, and then sometimes, Tyler, I hope you don't get upset with all these mistakes I've been making, because you get excited and then you want to make a story. I don't know, you want to make the best story ever, but then you see, oh my God, I have here a lot of grammar that I was not supposed to be using. But then Tyler tells me, no, Gustavo, calm down. We have to do this and that. And I think stories are becoming very fun, and we'll be using a lot of images, not just text, but a lot of images to help us tell these stories, since we don't want to use too much vocab and present suddenly 10 new verbs. We're using images to help us glue the different scenes and parts of each story together. And I think that images make the whole experience much more efficient, but as I said, engaging and more fun. I don't know, if we're telling a story about a snake that gets into someone's tent and tries to, I don't know, attack someone. If you look at a picture of a person completely terrified looking at a snake in a tent, the vocab just sticks, right? Instead of just seeing the list, snake, nachash. No, you see that scary snake, you get scared as well. You will remember that snake.
Right. Yeah.
That's it. What do you think, Tyler?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So basically, as Gustavo just mentioned, our curriculum is in 3 parts that we're working on right now. So you have to have a vocabulary builder, you have to have a grammar progression, and you have to have not just graded stories, but like you said, engaging stories. If they're not interesting, they can be great on grammar, but no one's going to read them because they're boring, and you lose a lot of that. So those are the 3 really important aspects to, I think, any language curriculum. The good thing about, so I guess I'm more the boring person here. I like making the lists and the grammar progression, but we've needed someone like Gustavo, who's just has his mind bursting with good ideas of how to put this together. And so if you want to come study Hebrew with us, you're going to get to see a lot of that excitement in the stories, and so it'll be really good. Looking forward to it. So
That's great. Tyler, so you said vocab builder. In terms of what you mean, so that's not just a list of vocab divided up week by week. What does the vocab component look like?
yeah, so if you want, I'll just walk through all 3 of those components, what that'll
Sure.
look like for the student, because
Yeah.
they'll want to know, how do I take this class? What does it mean it's an online class? Well, before coming to class, there are 3 things that a student will do, at least. The first is the vocabulary builder. Now, this is the worst part of a lot of curricula out there, I think, is that they literally just have a list of words. They say, learn these 10, 15 words, and then we're going to give you a text, and you'll kind of pull those words down, and you'll make the code work, and you translate it into English, and there's your story. And guess what? You're not going to remember those 10 words ever again. And so the vocabulary builder is actually extremely important, and it's in progress. So this year it's going to be most likely a slide presentation, where you will have a picture with your vocab word, and then most likely, I'm not sure how it's going to be set up. We haven't gone that far yet, but there will probably be a Hebrew sentence, and then if the student needs it, there will be a translation in English, perhaps on the next slide or something like that. And so the student not only sees a word and understands what the word is with a picture, maybe a definition, but they also get to see the word in context. The words are not standalone generally. Nouns are, they can be, but mostly words need to be in a context to be understood. And so we try to give a very simple context. So for instance, in the very first week, you're going to learn the word sus, which means horse. Now, that's fine. We can have a simple word like Hine sus, it means behold, a horse. And that's all the context you need, because you have a picture of a horse and you have the Hebrew word, and that's great. However, when you add something like walk, holech, that needs a context. It needs a subject, and it might even need a destination. So for this, picture, we might have a horse walking to a house, and then we say, and maybe we're teaching the verb walk, holech. So now we say sus, holech, and then we say to the house, el bayit. Maybe they've already learned that in a previous picture. So all of a sudden, the student is able to learn the word holech, walk, but they're also reviewing multiple other words that they had learned, and they're learning it in a context. So now they can say, I can make up my own sentence now. I can now say, a man walks to the house, or a donkey walks to the house. And all of a sudden, they have become creators. They have become communicators in an ancient language that they've never spoken before. And this is extremely important, is that you need to be producing your own unique content. You don't always need to be spoon-fed like a lot of curricula do. They try to spoon-feed it, and they try to only give you what's in the actual Bible because it's proper biblical Hebrew. And I don't want to downplay that necessarily. I think they have some good reasons for that, but we're teaching a language. And a language, you have to be creative as you're using it. And so anyway, this is the vocab builder. I think it'll be really good. Eventually, it'll be in a better format, a better program where you can have better review function and whatnot. But that's what we plan to have for this fall. I'll do the grammar progression, and then I'll pass it off to Gustavo to tell about how the students will work through the stories then. Grammar progression is the second element of the curriculum that they will study outside the classroom. It is a 1 to maybe 3 or so grammar lectures, short grammar lectures that they'll watch in English before coming to class. And you have people across the board on this. Should grammar be taught in the target language? Should it be taught in another language? I am of the opinion that a grammar topic can be taught in any language. It doesn't matter, and it's most useful when it's taught in the mother tongue of the student, because then it's after they learn the grammar point that they actually start using it in communication. So we want them to get into Hebrew with these grammar topics, but if they understand it really well, then they can actually produce it well. So that's the second part. We'll be building out these grammar lectures. And then third thing they'll do is going through the stories before they get to class. So Gustavo, how will that look?
So exactly. So we have the vocabulary builder. We have these grammar lectures, and I see that play out as sort of like, first you introduce the students all of these new words that they have to know, and then with the grammar lectures you make them aware of certain patterns and regularities that they will be able to see them really play out and really function in the language with the stories. And I think really it's a great thing to teach grammar in the students' mother tongue, because we, as you said, Tyler, we're not teaching Hebrew to people that are children and they're exposed to the language all day. It's such a great advantage to be able to understand certain things, certain concepts as adults in our own language, because then when you see these things in practice, you're able to process that much faster than children. We'll all be studying Hebrew our whole lives, so it is a lifelong journey. But we can use the languages that we already know as a way of making that journey faster. And I think that it will be a problem if we were to only teach grammar. That's really the problem with many traditional courses, right? To have just grammar all the time. But what we want is to teach vocab and grammar that will be used in the stories. So what we've been doing is we've been thinking about stories that really show these patterns, show these regularities many different times, but in a way that is engaging, that is not boring. And we want to have our students exposed to a lot of Hebrew. And at the beginning, especially, it will not be, one might say, authentic biblical Hebrew, because we want our students to read the Bible, but we want them to do that, but in a way that is not as harsh, that is not as
Deep, perhaps.
yes, exactly. So the stories have this function of hopefully making our students laugh along the way and get them to see the grammar really work out in interesting and weird situations, in funny situations. And as I said, we'll have a lot of snakes in the stories. Things will get scary sometimes, but I'm confident that our students will not run away once they see that snake in the desert. We have other things. We have amazing gardens. We have beautiful trees with a lot of flowers. We have not only deserts, we'll have mountains, we'll have vineyards, we'll have a lot of wine in those stories.
Yes.
And yes, so I don't want to give any spoilers, but characters may drink a lot of wine and get into trouble, but we'll find that out in the stories. And we'll learn a lot of things along the way.
Sounds extra scary if snakes start getting involved after they do that.
Yeah, things will get scary, but that's what we think we have to do.
Well, you guys have been great sports, and I don't want to keep you too long. So before we sign off, I just want to make the pitch for. Look, Tyler and Gustavo have brought years and years of their own personal study, of their own thinking about how to teach language in general and Hebrew in particular, and then many, many hours of the past months building this stuff. And so if you're thinking about learning biblical Hebrew, I think this would be such a fun experience. Once I've gotten through the 5 other language classes that I personally need to get through, then I'll do this one. So I probably won't be in this fall class, but if you register a term or 2 later, you might see me. But before we sign off, any final thoughts, Tyler, Gustavo, anything else you want to share or highlight?
Yeah, I would just make maybe 2 comments. First of all, I mentioned this earlier, language classes, language program really needs to teach language as a language. I don't think I can say that strongly enough, that learning an ancient language in one sense should be no different than learning a modern language. It's just that the people you're communicating with are dead. But that doesn't mean that communication doesn't happen. It's not that there's communication back to them, but there's communication to you. That's really why we're doing this, is because we want to read the text. We want the text to actually mean something, just like a conversation with my wife or with a friend actually should change me in certain ways. It should make me change my mind if I'm persuaded of something. Perhaps I shouldn't be persuaded of something, and so I resist that, or whatever it is. Language it affects you, and so when we read an ancient text, we need to have that in mind. We're having a conversation with this person that we're reading. They had ideas and things that they wanted to express, that they wanted to persuade us of, maybe good things, maybe bad things that happened that should affect us. We should cry, we should laugh, we should get so angry at characters in the story because they did the wrong thing. It should actually motivate us to be better people as well. So that's the first thing, that this is what we want as we do a spoken language curriculum. And also to help with that, I don't know if when this is coming in the works, but eventually I'd love to see some of my students in person. If we ever do a camp in the next couple of years, or
Yes,
something
please.
where there's actual interaction, where again we're taking this from an online once a week format of communication, where only so much can happen during that hour and a half, but to an actual period of time where we can go deeper, where we can actually have fun, communicating, cooking, eating together, experiencing a little bit more of that life together with an ancient language. So stay tuned, I would say, for something like that in the next couple of years. So that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah. And after all of those things that Tyler said, I just wanted to say that I'm very excited. I'm excited. I can't wait to start our course, and yes, to see it develop, see this curriculum unfold, and yeah, it has been a lot of fun, and we didn't even start the classes, so that's it. I'm very excited.
Good.
Me too.
Well, hey, if it should be obvious by now, both Tyler and Gustavo are really, really fun to hang out with and talk to. You guys would have a lot of fun in their classes. We hope to welcome you there, and to show you all the cool stuff we've been working on, and importantly, get to reading the Bible in Hebrew. So check out, I've got links below in the description for the video. Feel free to email us if you have any questions. We're happy to chat more, especially if you have some Hebrew experience, but you're not so sure where you'd fit into the program. We've lots of people in situations like that. But until then, thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.